Hey everybody, and welcome back to the Kidlit Chronicles. This is Hannah.
This is Chelsea.
And this is Nikki. On this show, we talk about kids' books, mostly the ones that we loved as kids of the early 2000s. So think Warrior Cats, The Hobbit, Coraline, and The Princess Bride. Sometimes we also read modern books and interview authors.
In this episode, we interviewed Michelle Lam about her debut graphic novel, Meesh the Bad Demon. Michelle is a storyboard artist and director in the animation industry, and she's also now a graphic novel author and illustrator. She's worked on several animated projects on Netflix, including Oni, Thunder God's Tale, and Arlo the Alligator Boy. She also posts comics on her Instagram and advice for young artists on her YouTube channel, which is mewTripled.
We talk about Michelle's inspiration for Meesh, her process of designing the world of fairies and demons, how her Asian American identity influenced the plot, and society's view on femininity. Just a disclaimer, we get deep into the details of the book, so be prepared for spoilers.
Don't forget to rate us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts. Follow us on Instagram and YouTube at The Kid Lake Chronicles and at Kid Lake Chronicle on Twitter. And as always, enjoy the episode.
First, I kind of wanted to just talk about, how I found you online. I know you as, mewTripled on YouTube and Instagram. And yeah, I've found your YouTube videos very helpful as someone who was an animation student who was kind of thrown into the abyss after graduating, and all your videos about advice for the industry and different art industries have been very helpful to me.
I'm glad. Thank you.
Yeah, it was through that I saw that you were publishing a middle grade graphic novel, and we already had this podcast where we talk about middle grade books, so I was like, haha, this is the perfect opportunity.
Wow. Yeah, thank you so much for having me on here, and thank you for supporting my work even outside of Mish. So I'm really glad that our paths have crossed.
Yeah.
Needless to say, we're big fans. And
Thank
speaking
you.
of all of the awesome things that you do in illustration and animation, can you tell us a little bit about your career and how you kind of got from where you started to writing and illustrating a graphic novel?
Yeah. So, after I graduated, I was also thrown into the abyss where I was just like, well, I'm not landing any jobs in animation. So the only thing that was giving me some sort of, attention or traction was starting to post comics on Instagram during my free time, because during that time, Instagram was not as much of a mess as it is now. And it was a pretty decent place for artists to post their work. And at that time, there were a lot of Disney animators or people working in animation who were active on Instagram. And I thought hey, maybe my way of breaking through the industry might require me to post more on Instagram. And at first I was very opposed to doing that because I was actually pretty anti-social media not too long ago. But I was kind of just biting the bullet and being maybe this is just what you gotta do, girl. So I did it. I started posting comics. And it wasn't because of my comics that I landed my first animation job, but it was through LinkedIn randomly. So I landed my first animation job at Netflix and Glen Keane Productions, where I was first a storyboard revisionist, then grew into a storyboard artist at Trash Truck. And while I was working there, I was also still posting comics on Instagram. I wanted to keep it up because I was just you never know what's going to happen. You never know if, once this job ends, nothing's going to happen again and you're just going to be back doing nothing. So I might as well keep the momentum going. And that's when somebody reached out to me after seeing me post comics on Instagram. And it was my now editor at Penguin Random House. And she asked me, hey, would you be interested in publishing a middle grade graphic novel at any point? And I was just at first, when I first started my job, I was just I'm not sure. I just started my first animation job that I literally worked so hard to get to, and I would really love to just focus on it. And then after a few months have passed and I really contemplated my career, and I was like, I feel like nowadays in animation, a lot of the works that people make are IP driven. And it's kind of one of those things, if you ever want to maybe have the chances of getting your own project out there, it kind of helps to have your own work that's kind of already been created elsewhere. So that's kind of when I was like, all right, I'll take on the graphic novel like opportunity, and I started working on Meesh the Bad Demon probably by the time I started my second animation job.
When we were talking to like Doig Swift, who are another group who are like animators turned like graphic novelists, they also said like making a graphic novel is a lot more achievable way to like create your vision than like creating your own animated series just because of
Yes, for
like
sure.
it's crazy to like fund your own animated series and everything.
I know. And it sometimes just feels like if you were to run your own project or create it, you have to like make these pitch Bibles and pitch them to studios, which might most of the time just lead to nowhere. And it's just like, I would rather just have something done that I could just be proud of on its own regard, instead of this like thing that only certain people have seen and I haven't even like been able to do anything else with it other than just pitch it to studios. So
Well, relatedly, you talking about like working on your graphic novel at the same time as like working an animation job. That's a lot of work. and
yeah, it is.
and you also you make YouTube videos and you're still making comics on your Instagram at the same time. So
Mhm.
I was just wondering, like, is there one of those art forms that you like really enjoy above the others that you might want to like settle into long term instead of like having to do everything all at once, which sounds like a lot of work again.
Yes, I mean I totally feel you. I mean that's the goal, is to eventually have, I feel like I'm just throwing a lot of things at the wall right now and seeing which one sticks. But I would definitely say that if I could choose like the ultimate dream at this moment, it would probably be continuing to create graphic novels and have one of them be able to be adapted to like an animated series. I would be okay with live action too, but I feel like for me, I'm more of like, I love animation. That's kind of where my interests began. So to have one of them being adapted to an animated film or series would be the ultimate dream. And, I could just sit in and just be like, yeah, everything looks great. And then I could go back and work on my own other graphic novels that I've moved on to, I guess, because I love just the fact that for the most part, when you work on a graphic novel, you're left alone for the most part, and you can just work on your vision. And yes, there's like a collaborative aspect to it, but for the most part, it's nowhere near as, I guess not intimidating, but like in animation, you have a lot of gatekeepers and people that just tell you what you can do, what you can't do. And it's just like, I always see my showrunners or directors always like having to really please like executives at these other bigger studios. And I haven't really felt like I had to deal with that while writing or drawing a graphic novel. For the most part, it's kind of been like doing a professional, quote unquote, version of my Instagram where, hey, I just get to make comics and just have it published to the world and see what happens, and you get paid for it. And it's cool and it's chill. The only thing I would say is I do wish that graphic novels were as stable as animation, because I do think animation is a more like stable financial career path than graphic novels for the time being. But I do think like maybe if I built a name for myself in the world of publishing, then maybe I could get to that state of animation. But yeah, ultimately the dream for now is to just do graphic novels with the hopes of one of them becoming adapted to animation.
Yeah, I would love to see a Mish TV series. That sounds really cool.
Yeah, I mean, that would be really cool for me too. So,
I'll go a little bit more into Mish specifically. So, we were wondering, how did the story of Mish the Bad Demon come to be? And why did you make the main character a demon? We were wondering if you really like enjoy demons particularly.
yeah, so I guess the story really originated from my Instagram comics because at first I had this series called Succubishes, but it's more of an adult themed comic. And obviously, I was asked to do a middle grade series, which is not something that I'm like too far away from, but it's definitely like I'm used to just like letting everything out unfiltered. But now I'm just like, all right, now I have to like tone it down, but I still want to keep like some of the deep messages the same, I guess. So originally, the demon imagery kind of came from me doing my Instagram comics, and I created this demon girl because during that time, I was just thinking about how, a lot of girls, females, or femininity is like demonized, a lot of just for existing. Like you could just be into really feminine things, and people will be like, ew, you like pink? That's gross. Or just viewing like things on a feminine level to be a lot lower than, I guess masculinity and stuff. Or like girls just get so much, I guess, criticism for just existing and breathing sometimes. So that's why I was like, I want to put horns on this girl because she's just living her life, doing whatever she wants. But to society, she's demonized or, the devil because she does things that our society was shaped to dislike. So putting the horns on her is kind of more of like the perspective of society. And then when it came to creating the graphic novel, like I wanted to maintain the whole demonized thing, but I kind of made it a little bit more literal, where I was like, there's a world of demons now, and there's a world of fairies. So I kind of took that abstract concept and made it more of a literal story in Mish.
Wow, I love that. And I definitely relate to that because when I was a kid, I feel like I leaned super hard into being a tomboy because I thought that
Yeah.
was what was cool. And it's only really in like the last few years that I've been like, oh, it's okay to like to dress up and it's not shallow or anything like that.
Yeah, of course. Like, same. That was me too. Like, I grew up with a lot of male cousins, which actually Xavier is inspired by. Like, he was inspired by my male cousin, but I always felt like I had to fit in with my male cousins because that was just who I hung around with. And I did have like a few select girl cousins, but they were a lot younger. And I felt like anytime I tried to lean in with them and try to be like fashionable or try to get into cute dolls or like even like plushies and stuff, I would be like pulled back from my male cousins and be like, hey, why are you liking that? You're not supposed to be liking that, blah blah blah. So that's kind of like where the Mish Xavier dynamic came from.
I think we all really liked Xavier too.
Thanks.
Yeah. Okay, well, I'm gonna pivot. I don't have a good segue for this question, but
Yeah, no worries.
I just wanted to ask, like, I think you've said that your favorite like kids book series was Tokyo Mew Mew, which is a
Yeah.
manga, right?
Yeah, so I grew up watching a lot of anime, but also mostly reading a lot of manga growing up. So that was one of my favorites for sure because I loved animals and I did like magical girls, but it was just like the fact that the magical girls turned into like an animal inspired thing was just like bonus points for me.
Yeah. And Mish specifically, like there does seem to be some magical girl inspiration, but also just some general
Yeah.
like manga generation inspiration. Because like for instance, I noticed like the like villain bad guy, he got like that anime glasses like glare when he was like plotting and scheming. So I
Yeah.
just wanted to ask generally if you were inspired by manga for Mish at all.
Yes, of course. I do feel like manga and anime has always been my greatest like inspiration in terms of the style because growing up, I actually like so I did watch a lot of Disney and Western films, but I felt like that was never really what inspired me or got me to really draw. It was really once I started watching like Pokemon or anything that was like anime or even just I was more interested in animals and anime and manga more so than just like Western cartoons. Like honestly like never really a Looney Tunes girl, so I'm
Binge.
sorry if there are any Looney Tunes fans out there. But I was just like, there was just something about that exaggerated humor that was never really my thing. But when it came to anime and manga, there was some more nuance to like the emotions that they drew, and there was like more of a gray area between what was like adult and what's for kids. I kind of loved that there was a mixture of many things rather than just this is strictly for kids and strictly comedy. And there's like, you know, action, humor, and like drama in a lot of like even kids related shows for anime. So I grew up pretty much consuming a lot of manga and anime, and I love drawing the styles. And when it came to like magical girls, again, like I felt like I love the aspect that, you know, you get to be something that you're not, but a lot of them also have to struggle with really accepting who you really are, and not like, even though you get this beautiful or this amazing power, you still have to learn to love the person without it, I guess. And that was one of the things I wanted to incorporate in Mish, where it's just like, you know, you're going to be given this power, but you're going to still have to learn to love yourself without it. So that's kind of what inspired me from the anime manga world.
Yeah. I also grew up watching a lot of anime as well.
Yeah. I also feel like it's just the rebellious side of me that's like, you know, I've been restricted from drawing this style for so long, because when you're growing up, you're told to not draw anime or manga that much. But now I'm just like, now everyone in animation is like drawing inspiration from it. Studios are like so open to adapting the styles. They're even like purely anime driven shows being made at American studios that it's just like, well, look at how the tables turn.
It's true. And especially like I feel like I've heard it said before that like I know we're like slightly different ages, but we're both like in our 20s, right? I guess I'm not entirely sure where the gap is. But like growing up, I feel like there was a gap in American cartoons of like, you know, there wasn't that much for girls specifically, but then anime kind of filled that gap for a lot of people.
Yes. Oh my gosh, I totally agree with that, because I felt like one of the things too that I loved about anime and manga was I felt like a lot of the shows even empowered femininity or like allowed girls to feel powerful. Like you get like a lot of, you know, Western animations that are like, yeah, you'll have your Disney princesses and stuff, but do they fight? Like that's the real question. Do they fight while wearing a dress though? That's the thing I felt like I really liked about the magical girl trope, I guess, is that I enjoyed seeing them being able to be girly and cute, but also like doing really actiony things as well.
Exactly, yeah.
So you mentioned some of those deeper themes, and I can definitely see the inspiration of like how anime, there's not as clear of a line between like what's for kids, what's for adults. And in Mish, there are a lot of really serious, you know, deep themes that you are distilling for a younger audience, which I really love. And I read in some other interviews that a part of this identity journey that Mish goes on also has to do with your own, you know, personal identity journey with being Asian American. And I also write a lot on the side, and I write about being Asian like all the time.
Yeah.
So yeah, you mentioned how Mish's struggle with demonness is about femininity, but I can also see it about being about Asian American identity. So I was wondering if you could talk a little bit more about what that process of incorporating that theme was like for you.
Yeah, of course. And yeah, you actually got it spot on where, yeah, her demonization also definitely came from how I guess I viewed my own Asian American identity, as well as like the whole pandemic as well. I feel like when I made Mish, it was before the pandemic began, but I also started having to actually, you know, draw the rough sketches and start executing on the story the moment the pandemic happened. And that was also like the beginning or rise of like the Asian hate crimes in America. And I was just like obviously I'm not saying like, oh, I was so inspired by all of this violence. No, it was more of like, you know, this is a truth that I feel like still exists, that, you know, I feel like relates to what I want to say in my book. So I felt like when I was creating Mish, I was thinking about the fact that, I never really thought about myself like being like Asian like that deeply until now, because there's a lot of people who are targeting people of like our community. That could be like my mom, that could be my dad, that could be my grandma or whoever, just because of this sickness that people think is associated with just a certain race. So I felt like when I was making Mish, is kind of I was thinking about how it felt like the world was kind of like anti-Asian at one point, kind of like how in Mish's world like everyone kind of has this negative association with demons. So I felt like that was kind of also what inspired Mish's journey, of course, was if instead of her accepting herself as a demon, it was kind of me accepting myself as like, Chinese American, or being like someone who's a part of this group that people currently don't really have fond thoughts of, like even if it's not like from COVID, it's even like from politics nowadays, with people like being anti-China or something, and you just like have to associate yourself with this. And it's kind of like, once people are starting to be more against your group or your community, it kind of forces you to be more protective of it, and to kind of like be the person who does what they can to, I guess, bring the goodness out of it. So that was kind of what inspired me to make Mish learn to love herself as a demon. It's kind of like from me learning to love myself as an Asian American, when it felt like the whole world was almost against like our community at some point.
Yeah, I definitely relate to that, because I think the pandemic was a real turning point for me too with writing, because I barely wrote about Asian American issues before that point. And then like all of a sudden the pandemic, I was writing so many different essays. And I think it really helped me process that. And what I really liked about how you approached it in Mish is it wasn't just, I guess, one-on-one individual, microaggressions for her being a demon, although that was definitely a part of it. But you go into this really systemic angle, when the team has their heist in the museum and Misha's seeing all of this history that she didn't even know about. I like that, because I think when we talk about racism, I think especially for younger audiences, that nuance of it being a system is not really expanded upon.
Yeah, that was the thing that was the greatest challenge for me for this book, for sure, was I was just like, wow, this is like a lot of stuff that I'm talking about with, my peers, or like people in my industry, or just my family, people who are definitely a lot older. This is stuff I did not think about when I was in middle school, for sure. So I definitely wanted to be able to discuss that, but compacting it in a way where hopefully somebody a lot younger can somewhat understand, was the biggest challenge, for sure. But that was definitely one of the things I wanted to discuss in the story, was, even though you face a lot of racism or discrimination in like different ways growing up under a certain like group, I feel like there's definitely so much more behind it that you don't even know, but there's also a part of you that even you yourself exhibit some of those things that you subconsciously learned when you were little. Like you even have like biases or like mistakes that you've done, which I wanted Mish to also like. Yeah, Mish is kind of like, she has been a victim of racism, but she also kind of generalizes and creates biases herself. Like even with Nouna, she thought she was this like perfect princess or something, when really she was never really aware, and she's naive and ignorant because she's young, but she never knew that Nouna had her own like, struggles growing up, and has this thing that she's been hiding. And she also has been glorifying this group of creatures that she didn't know has also had their faults in the past. So it's just like, it feels like just this cycle that society goes through.
So our next thing we were wondering about was, what was your inspiration for Nouna's storyline? Specifically, you showed how she had a broken wing and was unable to fly without her mother's power at the beginning of the book. But then she later learns how to fly on her own with Mish's help. So we were just wondering at kind of the different ways you could interpret that, such as, you know, like a disability metaphor, or just like learning to have self-confidence, or how parental love can hold you back, like a overprotective parent type of situation. So what were your thoughts and inspiration for that storyline?
Yeah, so I definitely think like the parental like figure being a either present or not present role in your life was a big one, and or I guess like the overprotectiveness of it as well. And also just the fact that I feel like we live in a generation where we see things on TV or on our phones, and we think like everyone that we see is like this whatever image they're trying to portray of themselves, when really you don't know what they're actually going through. So it's kind of a mixture of, I guess a commentary on social media as well as parents, because originally Nouna was born with this broken wing, and her mother, being the queen, is so busy with her life that she kind of doesn't really have the time to like care for her own daughter, but she also, I guess, is very overprotective at the same time, and she doesn't want her to like really leave Lumeria City, and she doesn't really want Nouna to, be in danger, because she's a busy queen, and I guess the least she could do is just make sure that her daughter doesn't get into trouble. But of course, with Nouna being like, so I guess not like repressed, but like she is repressed. She is like very like stuck inside this world that her mom runs, and she has to also pretend to be this fairy on TV, where she's like a superhero, where she's perfect and she saves the world, but she's really not. So when Mish watches a show about Nouna, she thinks Nouna is this perfect princess hero, kind of just like how when we watch people on social media, we think like, oh, they're just like these super powerful people in some way or some form, and really they're not. So I feel like by the time Nouna exposes herself to Mish and who she really is, I think that's more of like saying how we think we know people just from the way they paint themselves online or even on TV, but we really have no idea who these people are. And even though Nouna comes from a very prestigious background, her relationship with her mom isn't the most perfect, and she hasn't really received the proper love and care from her mom either, beyond just the overprotectiveness and the shelteredness, and maybe even the lack of care to teaching her to be like able to fly. So, but Mish, she watched all of the shows about Nouna. She loves like watching fairy stuff, so she knows, I guess, how to quote unquote fly, or even learning from being a demon in the guardian form, she learns to fly. So I feel like from that, they're able to bond on their imperfections, and that's the way that they eventually learn how to fly. But yeah, to answer your question, Nouna is basically like kind of a symbolism, I guess, of how we view people on social media and think that they're perfect when really they're not.
Yeah, I just think it's a interesting conflict. Someone meeting like someone that they are a huge fan of, and like becoming friends and going on an adventure with them. I thought it was, and their relationship had a lot of ups and downs throughout the plot. So that was cool, and that is one of the things I was excited about for future Mish related content, finding out unraveling Nouna's backstory a bit more maybe, and
Yeah.
her relationship with Mish and stuff like that. That was what I really
Yeah.
was drawn to in the novel.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad. Thank
Okay.
you.
So I'm going to pivot from talking about the themes to perhaps talking about the art a little bit, because I am also an artist, so these things interest
Yeah.
me. And yeah, I love the art in Mish. I really like your art style. It's very
Thank you so
charming.
much. Thank you.
And particularly one thing that caught my eye was like when Mish and the gang like all went back to the demon city, the background changed from white to black, and I was like, ooh, this is so
Yeah.
dramatic and cool. So that was great.
Thank you.
Yeah, I also like the character designs, particularly Mish and her little fairy outfit with her leaf wings. That was really
Thank
cute.
you. Thanks.
So yeah, I just wanted to ask about like what your thought process was behind the main characters and their character designs, like Mish, Nouna, Chai, and Xavier.
Yeah. So the character design for Mish was easy just because I wanted to make her very reminiscent of like my younger self. And pretty much every Asian kid is given that bob when they're younger, with just straight bangs, straight medium hair that just ends at the shoulders. So that was like pretty easy for Misha. I was like, all right, okay, cool. And Nouna is actually inspired from my friend Noor, who I grew up with in college, and she is actually originally from Iraq, but she then later on moved to Dubai with her family. So her design is very inspired by, like Middle Eastern culture. I even asked my friend Noor, like, what are some good, appropriate, like clothing that I could dress Nouna in, or like even like add to the world. So my friend Noor sent me some like really cool like outfits inspired from like Iraq, and like I was just like trying to simplify it because it's so beautiful, but I was just like, there are also so many details that I'm just like, how can I compress this into like a cartoon? So I would send it back to my friend Noor, and I was like, what do you think of this? And then she would be like, oh yeah, that's like so cute. So I consulted a lot of Nuna's design with my friend Noor. Xavier, I just like honestly thought of my cousin because he's the one that kind of inspired him, and he was the one that kind of bullied me growing up, but obviously we're cool now. But honestly, just like that spiky hair is something that it's just, I feel like also a lot of Asian boys have. So I was just like, I just gotta do that hairstyle that reminds me of my cousin. And with Chai, she was actually more of like the surprise character that I did not really have a design for, or a person that purely inspired me for her. So she's kind of more inspired by her, I guess, personality and attitude is inspired by my boyfriend. But I was like, obviously she's not my boyfriend. She is just inspired like personality wise, but I still want to make her her own character. And I've had like a collection of friends in the past who are more of that outgoing personality. So character wise, that's kind of where she came from. But design wise, I wanted her to, of course, be like a werewolf, because I thought it was cool that there was a lot of creatures that, they're demons, fairies, but now we have somebody who's like in the in-between. She can both be a human and a werewolf. So her design is mostly inspired by like wolves and just like their fur, I guess, and just I don't know, they're very like, I don't know how to describe it, just their wild nature, I guess. But I still wanted to make her like somebody who was friendly and just has that simple life, and that's what she enjoys doing. So that's why I kept her like simple, just like she loves wearing her hat, t-shirt, jeans. We're good.
Yeah, I love her fluffy hair, her fluffy
Yeah,
white
thank
hair.
you. Yeah.
Yeah. A cute little werewolf kid is a very good character
Yeah.
choice, I think.
Thank you.
I also thought of wolf walkers because I watched that movie recently, and I was
Oh
like, wow,
yeah.
Chai is basically a wolf walker.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
I thought that was epic. Related to Chai, I think she might have been my favorite character in the
Oh,
book.
thank you. Thanks.
And yeah, I am really curious about her like backstory, because something similar obviously like happened in her city as
Mhm.
happened to the demons. So yeah, I was wondering if perhaps we're gonna see more of Chai's backstory in future books.
Oh yeah, for sure. It's really funny because I've been working on book 2, and it's really weird that book 1 came out. I feel like there's just such a like delay, I guess, with your book's release, and you're just like already moved on to like so deep into the next project already. So by the time Mish book 1 came out, I was just like, I feel like I'm not even mentally with this book anymore. So yeah, I started book 2, and I will say that yes, we will get more Chai content in that. In fact, as a little bit of a hint, she begins book 2, but that's all I'll leave it as. But
Wow.
we will get more chai content in book 2, and I'm also really excited in general to be able to expand more on the characters for sure. I feel like book 1 was definitely more of like, all right, introduction. Book 2 is more like, okay, explanation. So yeah.
Yeah, I'm really interested in that because there were a lot of things that really piqued my curiosity, and in a good way, of course, like, oh, I really want to see how this comes back later and see, like what unravels from here with the characters and with like the history between the demons and the fairies,
Yeah.
stuff like that. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. That's definitely gonna be unpacked in book 2 for sure.
Awesome. Okay. Um do you have a plan for how many books will be in the Mish series, and do you have some kind of grand finale in mind?
So I will say the grand finale is actually still in the works because we actually don't know if Mish is going to end in either book 2 or a potential book 3 yet. That is still currently in the discussions. Right now, there is an established 2 books for sure, but book 3 is still in the talks because it's not in contract right now, but there's been talks about it. So I will say that book 2 will hopefully be able to definitely cover more of what book 1 has introduced. And if there's stuff that is unresolved in book 2, maybe it can then be resolved in a book 3. But I think it would be nice to have 3 books just to have like that perfect 3-volume perfection versus like just 2 books. It feels like there's still one missing. But yeah, I will say 2 books officially, but 1 book is still in the air.
Oh, I hope you get that 3rd book.
I know, I hope so too.
Yeah, so we actually had a couple thoughts, questions / predictions for the next book or 2 that we wanted to share with you. I am really interested in learning more about the big bad.
Yes.
I feel like I wasn't really paying attention that closely to their character design while I was reading it, but when I was flipping back through it, like, yeah, I noticed that they're always wearing a hat. And they don't have fairy wings, but they have a henchman who's a fairy. So it fills me with a lot of questions about who exactly this person is. Yeah. So I don't know if I have a solid prediction, but I was thinking that they could be a demon, I guess, if they were hiding horns under their hat or perhaps something else. But yeah.
That is a very juicy prediction.
My prediction is just related to chai because I like chai a lot. Like I said, I'm just curious about their backstory, and I hope that perhaps we'll get to go back to her hometown and like maybe the gang will be able to fix the problem there like they fixed the problem with the demons. So
Yeah.
that's what I want to see. I don't know if it'll happen though.
Yeah, and then I've already kind of talked about mine on and off. I just want to know those juicy backstories. And we haven't really mentioned Misha's grandma yet, but she was a really, really nice, warm character. It kind of goes into her previous life as a guardian at the very end, so I'm curious to know more about that.
Oh yeah, well, I will say we shall see what happens in book 2. I'm trying to like not say yes or no, but I'm just like, oh yeah, book 2.
Yeah, it's a complete mystery to you, I'm sure. Who knows?
Yes, I have no idea, even though I've literally been like so deep into that book since last year.
Well, thank you so much for talking with us and answering all of our questions. And I know that all of us are really excited to see what the next book entails.
Yeah.
So looking forward to that.
Yeah, thank you so much for asking such great questions and being like so engaged with the book. Like I really appreciate like all of the predictions because they actually were really fun for me to hear and see, and internally know how accurate some of them actually could be.
Well, our last question is just for our viewers' benefit. Where can people find you online?
So you can find me on Instagram at mewTripled, which is mewTripled, which, yeah, that username is inspired by my 11-year-old self loving Tokyo Mew Mew. But yeah, I post comics there. I also, under the same username, post videos on YouTube, kind of more directed on people who are interested in pursuing art or animation as a career. It's kind of more of my behind the scenes, I guess, channel where I'm just like, this is how I'm able to do this or that, because so many people ask me how I do this or that. So I'm like, okay, watch my YouTube channel. And yeah, otherwise, yeah, I'm mostly on Instagram and YouTube. And yeah, that's it.
So go find her, go seek her out.
Yeah, thank
Look at those
you.
comics, they're great.
And with that, we'll leave with a little bit of a hint of our next episode. We are returning after what seems like a million years to the Ranger's Apprentice series with the third book, The Icebound Land. So watch out for that. And thank you again, Michelle.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been like such an awesome time talking to you all.